Hey everybody, welcome. This is again a video from me, Mr. Gennaro. Hope you guys are enjoying your first week back at school. I'm going to go ahead and give you a week one lecture. This goes along with chapter one. It's a way just to support your listening, your learning experience. I can kind of chime in my own thoughts about things and go through the lecture slides with you. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to share screen mode here. Okay, so if you look here, you can see our Canvas page. I'm going to make sure that I go to the modules section right here. And underneath student resources, go to module one. I'm going to be going along with the week one lecture slides right here. Now for my purposes, I'm going to use my Google slide, but you can save this PDF for yourself if you want to review it on your own time. This is a great way to study for the midterm or any of the quizzes that are coming up too. I'm going to go right here to my layout. Okay, so this is an exciting chapter. This is really asking the big question of the overall class in some ways. First, starting with what is music? I think we all enjoy music. I always ask people, and no one ever says no to the question, do you enjoy music? Almost everyone says yes, right? So this is a fun class to teach for that reason, and really, this is the big question. What is music? So the book kind of asks you this question from the very beginning, and it actually is your first homework assignment question too. How do we make a definition of music which is inclusive yet specific, right? Think about all the different genres of music. Think about how some music can be a little bit more avant-garde or experimental, right? What makes film music different from music used in a symphony hall or in a cafe, for example? We have so much variety that we need to consider. So normally in class, I would ask you to ask this question, but maybe just consider asking this of someone, maybe a friend. What is music to them? If you had to describe it to aliens, what kind of language would you use to describe it? One of my favorites is just to say that it's wavy air. It's our ears perceiving changes in vibration, and we ascribe meaning to it through art. This is a dictionary definition. So Merriam-Webster dictionary says, the science or art of ordering tones or sounds in succession, in combination in temporal relationships to produce a composition having unity and continuity. So this word here, temporal relationships, this has to do with time, right? A piece of music has to be experienced from beginning to end. All songs follow that rule. That's different from other forms of art. For example, a painting that can exist in a museum. We also have this idea of unity and continuity, the idea that things have to fit together for a piece to make sense. Now, this definition is hard to criticize, but there are some things that it seems to lack. We could argue, what about the power for music to make us cry, to dance, or become overwhelmed with nostalgia? Imagine the songs that you might have heard as a child. Maybe some of those songs have deep meanings to you. Or it could be the albums that your parents listened to when they drove you around in the car, right? These things have deep places in our memory, I would say. There's also the idea, what about music that connects us as a nation? When you hear the national anthem of our own country, does that mean something to you? Or maybe when you hear the national anthem of another country that holds meaning to your family. So a dictionary definition can't really capture all of the emotional qualities that music holds over us. And this all comes from the textbooks, which I hope you're reading. Now, another definition here comes just from Google. Always good to check good old Google, right? Vocal or instrumental sounds, or both, combined in such a way as to produce beauty of harmony, form, and expression of emotion. So this is not a bad definition either. It describes most music that we hear for sure. But does music have to be beautiful? I always ask this question and say, what about metal music? I wouldn't say that's beautiful. It's interesting. It's very powerful. But I wouldn't say that's beautiful music, right? So who's to argue to say what is beautiful? This is this fancy word, arbiter. Who's to say what is beautiful? Everyone has different opinions, right? Does music have to express emotion? Could music be emotionless? And what about music that is created by not by voices or instruments, but by computers? Most music that we hear on the radio nowadays, electronic dance music, hip hop, for example, has some kind of computer at the core of it and an engineer creating the beat, for example. That's all a new way of making music. So this definition is good, but it does have some things that it might be missing as well. Maybe we're getting closer. Now, we're going to take a little side tangent here. The composer John Cage was a huge influential figure. He was part of what we call the American avant-garde movement of composition, and he did many things to advance and challenge the notion of what we consider to be music. It's important to note that for John Cage, here he is at the piano writing some music probably. It's important to know that he was alive at a time where there was new advances in technology, right? Um, for example, we could talk about recording equipment that was newly invented probably in the 1940s, that people could actually record on reel-to-reel tapes and record sounds for the first time at home. That's pretty revolutionary when you think about it. Now we all have a phone in our pocket that can record audio at any time that we want through a voice memo. But this was all brand new technology. So the piece that we're going to talk about is a piece of music called 4 minutes and 33 seconds, 433. It was composed in 1952 and premiered at a concert on August 29th, 1952. American composer John Cage. He made a statement through this piece of music, not with a performance, but a composition that is known as 433. The premiere was played or performed by a pianist named David Tudor, who came on the stage and sat in total silence at the keyboard for the whole time of the piece. Again, 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Interrupting his performance, he only stopped or did anything really to open and close the keyboard at predetermined time markers within the score. So there was kind of a set of instructions instead of actually seeing notes on the paper, basically. The musical contents of the performance, therefore, were not the sounds that came from the piano, but rather the incidental sounds that audience members happened to perceive during the allotted time. So imagine you're sitting there, you might hear these kind of sounds, right? The rustling of the programs, people whispering, what's going on? Laughter, a passing train came by actually during the performance too. The composer certainly did not know what these sounds would be, right? He can't predict what people are going to do, but he knew that they'd be doing something. So, and he, in creating the piece, exercised no control over them. And indeed, the sounds heard during the performance today would in some cases have been unimaginable to the composer, who died in 1992. So what they're saying at the end here is that, imagine this happening not in 1952, but in 2023 or 2024, in the modern era. What kind of sounds would we hear nowadays? Maybe a cell phone goes off. They didn't have cell phones in 1952. Maybe a Tesla drives by. There are no Teslas at this time, right? So the whole idea here is that it's all about your experience as the listener. That there is no true silence, that even when a piece that has no piano sounds, you would hear something. So he's kind of drawing attention to silence in a way, and our experience as the listener, first and foremost. This is the piece of music, 4 minutes and 33 seconds. It's a little bit blurry, sorry. But you can see, we see movement 1, movement 2, and then everything is just blank. There's no musical notes here, except there are some time markers. This is a time marker right here. I can't quite tell, but it's blurry. But you can see there are some instructions of movement 1, opening and closing the piano, and then moving into movement 2. So you might ask, that sounds pretty extreme, right? A piano piece that has no notes. This was actually inspired by Robert Rauschenberg. Cage was really inspired by his work, which was these white paintings. Again, sounds kind of funny, right? But when Cage saw the white painting in the exhibition, he immediately recognized that there was no need for him to produce his silent piece. The white paintings were airports for the light, shadows and particles. This, imagine, I'm going to stop for a second, just any piece of dust that passes over this, or maybe the lighting changes, a shadow gets cast on this. So the whiteness is actually the perfect canvas for things to appear onto it, just like how silence is the perfect place to hear the sounds that are constantly around us that maybe we aren't always perceiving. I'm going to continue reading. In other words, the paintings were about everything else in the room, about the natural environment. 4 minutes and 33 seconds. 2 was to be an ode to everything outside the reach of the composer and his musicians. 4 minutes 33 seconds was to be an ode to life. This is from Henry Reagan. So, back to John Cage. His music composition teacher was named Arnold Schoenberg. He was a famous composer and also taught at UCLA for many years too. But he was actually European of descent. But he said about John Cage that he was not a composer, but an inventor of genius. So we are considering John Cage, again, here, not to just be a composer of music, but he's somebody who is making us think a little bit more philosophically about our surroundings and our experience as listeners. Okay? So 4 minutes 33 seconds, 4:33, in Cage's book right here called Silence, is a collection of writings about music. Silence makes us reconsider these questions. What constitutes the art of listening in music? Is there such a thing as true silence? Is silence only about noise? Or is there a spiritual and metaphysical silence that also exists? A little bit more about 433. The object of this composition was to make the case that any sounds could be music as long as they were listened to as music. So again, they're shifting the role of this experience to be not about the person who writes the music, but your role as the listener. Sorry about that. There we go. Excuse me. In other words, music is in the ear of the beholder. This shifts the focus away from the composer and into the perspective of the listener. It is not defined, it is defined not by its source or by the intent of its creator, it is defined by the act of listening. When I consider this piece, it makes me think how silence and our perception of it has changed since the creation of this piece. We're all surrounded by a lot more technology, cell phones, TVs. We hear a lot more noise than I think people did in the 1950s. When asked to comment on his own piece, John Cage said this, I thought it was funny. They missed the point. There is no such thing as silence. And we're going to get right into that on the next slide here. Oh, sorry, 2 slides. I won't play these just for the interest of time, but I encourage you to listen to these 2 pieces of music. The first one is called In a Landscape. It's a really beautiful piece, one of John Cage's earlier works that is a little bit more traditional. It's very beautiful, but what I love about this piece in particular is how sparse and open sounding the piano is. It's not elaborate, but very beautiful in its open and reverberant sounds. The other one is kind of, I would say, very interesting. This is a TV appearance that John Cage did in 1960 on a TV show called I've Got a Secret. This is kind of how he rose to fame, you could say, for a short time, where he was known all across the United States in almost every household because of this performance. It's pretty silly, but it's one of his pieces called Water Walk. It wasn't meant to be silly per se. I can't talk too much about it, but I can say that just imagine some of the things that you see: a bathtub. Um, Everything has to do with water. There is a piano involved too. You'll have to just watch it for yourself. But imagine all these new inventions. The tea kettle, for example. He was using things that would be in the house to produce sounds, and it does create a certain sonic listening experience for us. Check those out. I'm going to continue. This is also a couple interesting videos right here, considering the idea of silence. The, these are both about what are called anechoic chambers. These are basically laboratory environments where they are designed to have no sound, essentially. So most rooms have some kind of ringing. In these rooms, it's extremely quiet. And the first one from Microsoft actually gets into the science, how they record this with very high-tech microphones. And they broke a world record, basically, for creating the quietest place. It's worth a listen or a watch. The other one is more of a person's experience going into one of these rooms, which I have heard has been described as quite bizarre. I've never done it myself, but I would love to check one out. These kind of things are used for testing uh, devices that are all about sound. For example, noise canceling headphones. They have to use these environments to truly test how well they design your headphones for their purpose. There's a lot of other applications too that they get into this video. I'm going to move ahead here. Oops. There we go. So continuing with the idea of the role of the listener, Pauline Oliveros is a really interesting figure in music history. She actually taught at Mills College, where I went to school as well, so I have a small connection to her. But she was the first person to adopt this word or this phrase, deep listening. And it kind of gets to what John Cage was talking about with his piece 433, but from a different perspective. It really describes what is the active process of listening in a very intense way. And when you think about it, we're really talking about the difference between hearing and listening, right? When we listen, we are listening with more intent. We're listening to try to understand something. This is not really a role of the ear, it's more of a role of the brain and our own thought processes, our imaginations too. So I'm going to read this quote from Pauline Oliveros. Deep listening is listening to everything all the time and reminding yourself when you're not, but going below the surface too. It's an active process. It's not passive. I mean, hearing is passive in that sound waves hinge upon the eardrum. You can do both. You can focus and be receptive to your surroundings. If you are tuned out, then you're not in contact with your surroundings. You have to process what you hear. Hearing and listening are not the same. There's a lot to be said about that, right? This idea that our eardrum is how we hear. We're always receiving sounds to our eardrum, unless we're in the anechoic chamber, maybe, right? However, and if you haven't watched that, maybe go back, pause the video, watch those other YouTube videos in the slide. You can check them out for yourself. But this idea that when we really are activating our ears in a way to be not just listening to what's around us, but listening for understanding, for listening like she says, in a deep way. Oh, going back here, sorry. This is a great TED Talk I would encourage you to watch as well. It talks about her experience recording music in the underground cistern. So this is an underground space that has extreme echo, essentially, a huge reverberation. It starts off with a great sound. I won't tell you what it is, but check it out. And she talks about her experience of recording in this unconventional space and how learning to listen to your own sound echoing was their way of creating some very interesting music. They actually created a band called the Deep Listening Band, basically, where they created improvisational music where they played against the acoustics of this underground space. So I would again pause this video, go watch this one instead. She devoted her whole life to music, so I would definitely encourage you to listen to what she has to say. Okay, I'm going to continue though. Again, if you liked Pauline Oliveros, these are 3 more videos. I always try to give you guys new things to listen to in these slides. So check out these if you're interested. This is in the middle, is the full Deep Listening album. It was recorded in the underground cistern. The other ones are her other pieces. This is A Woman Sees How the World Goes with No Eyes. And you can see she was an accordion player too, but she played it in a very unique way. A little bit experimental, but you might enjoy it. And the other one is called Bye Bye Butterfly. I'd encourage you to listen to all of these if you have some free time. Now, these 3 videos, this one on the left might need to be edited. You can just do a YouTube search of Sounds of the Junkyard. Sorry about that. But these were the 3 examples listed in the homework, and the book talks about all 3 of these pieces too. It asks the question, what can we consider music? What about the sounds of a city? What about the sounds of a junkyard? Um, I would encourage you to check these out just for a little bit, each one. They're pretty interesting. Sounds of the Junkyard is just that. They set up some microphones in a junkyard. But when you listen to it, just think, it does transport your mind to another place, right? Because you're getting the real experience of it. This album, again, sorry, it's not quite loaded here, but this album did inspire the band Sonic Youth in their sounds too, as a rock band, to maybe experiment with what can fit within a rock album. Now, in the middle, this is one of John Cage's other pieces. It's very different from the other ones. He has pieces kind of all over the place. But this is Williams' Mix. Um, it really is kind of like one of the first sound collage pieces. Because remember, we're talking about reel-to-reel tapes. So if you could cut up the tapes and put them together, you could create composites of some very interesting sounds that maybe you could never hear in a natural environment. So this is Williams' Mix. Listening to it is an experience. It might be something that you've never heard before. I'd encourage you to have an open mind and check it out. And then the last one here is Henry Cowell's piece, Dynamic Motion. This was written in 1916, so imagine what it would be like in New York City, 1916, and there's a new invention, and it's actually the train, the trains that go all throughout New York City. So this piece was designed to mimic the sounds of this new invention, the city train, using just the piano. So he goes at it in a very untraditional way. There are these huge cluster chords. You can see them right here, these big bars. This is literally, maybe one or both arms across the keys of the piano to create an extreme dissonant sound. So again, these are pieces that I'd like you to talk about in your homework question. I think I asked you to just choose one of them, but maybe listen to all 3 and then choose which one that you would like to listen to write about. I'm moving ahead here, but again, if you want to pause the video, listen to those, I'd encourage you, take a little break from hearing me talk. Check out some music, please. Now, this is, if you're ready to move on, this is part 2. So part 2, in the textbook, they call it the power of music and why it matters to humans. Clearly, music is very important. We use it for many things in life. The significance of music goes back to historical times. It has a certain biological approach. Imagine all these sounds that we hear in nature, the sounds of birds and other animals. It has a spiritual connection. Imagine going to church. You might hear music, right? It connects us to the spiritual side that we feel. There's also the cultural side. All cultures have music, and they use it to tell stories or to dance. We also have the metaphysical perspectives, this idea that music affects our brain in a very deep and powerful way. So we'll get into all this a little bit. Like I said, music can be found across every culture in the world. Music has an effect on the brain and our well-being. We'll talk about that. And we also use music to commemorate special occasions, like, if you graduated from high school, they play the song. If you go to a birthday party, you might hear happy birthday. So we use songs for these special things, all of these special moments in our lives, religious purposes, spiritual reasons. Maybe you meditate, you might strike a singing bowl. And also we use it to convey emotion. Some of our favorite bands, right, are telling us things about life, or maybe our favorite artist or singer. They're using the songs to convey emotion. Now this, I think, speaks to the power of music too. This is from the textbook. This picture, this is a bone flute that was found in Germany. It's one of the oldest known musical instruments. I believe it's about 39,000 years old. And you can see the design is not that much different from the flute we use today. It's a hollowed out bone. We use metal now, of course. A place to blow air, and a couple of holes where you could place your fingers to change the pitch of the flute. So again, this shows how important music has been to our culture as a civilization for thousands of years. Now, we're continuing here with, is music, why is it so important to humans? The question the book asks is music a human phenomenon? Animals also make very unique sounds. We, of course, know and hear all the time here bird songs. We might have heard some whale songs. But are they really singing? Are they thinking of what they're doing as music, or is it some other form of communication? We can't know for sure. Some theorize that music in humans may have come from our attempt to copy the sounds heard in nature. So imagine you hear a bird call, you might try to mimic it using a flute or using your voice to sing. You might also use it for hunting, for example, to attract some birds. You never know. It's hard to know these things. They go so far back into our history, right? But it's worth asking the question. Now, this video right here, I'll let you check it out for yourself. It's very interesting. They took different animals, and someone actually took the time to notate through music notation that instrumentalists could read all the different notes, all the different pitches that were made by these animals. And I won't spoil the surprise, but there is a very funny one at the end. So check this out. It's pretty interesting. So again, getting back to the question of, is music strictly a human phenomenon? We could ask some questions about what makes humans unique compared to other animals and why music is really only experienced by us as art. So first of all, humans have recognition of self and are aware of ourselves. We call it self-conscious. Other animals do that too, though. For example, primates like Coco the gorilla here could recognize herself in a mirror. They knew it was themselves. Other animals can't do that, like a bird, for example. Humans appreciate beauty and aesthetics. We care how things look, and we're compelled to make art. We're compelled to make things that look beautiful to us and things that sound beautiful or interesting to us too. But this is also common in birds. Birds decorate their nests or their mating grounds. Elephants can paint. We can see that in this picture right here. But does this art hold aesthetic meaning to them? Probably not. They probably don't have a real connection to the painting years later. Or maybe they do. Hard to know again. Another thing we could talk about or consider is the awareness of death, the fact that we as humans know that we are not immortal. We know that we will die someday. So this might make us appreciate things in a different way. But elephants also do mourn their dead, and they have burial grounds and hold funerals. Elephants are pretty unique. Humans, one thing that we know about us that's unique is that we have an awareness of time. So, for example, we have a way of measuring time through seconds or hours or weeks or months. We also know that a day has passed or 2 days has passed. So we have a different relationship to time than other beings on our planet. Although, yes, it's true that your dog probably knows when it's time for dinner, this is more of a learned behavior. Humans also can exhibit love and other complex emotions. Animals can also exhibit compassion and love to one another. And pets to owners, we all know that. But to what level is this love? So for the question of this is, does your cat really love you as much as you might love your husband or your wife or your significant other, right? So this love compels us to create art perhaps too. And then probably the biggest thing that the textbook acknowledges, and again, remember to read the textbook as well, chapter 1, but the idea that spoken and written language is very unique to humans. We not only can speak, but we have a way of writing this. We have a way of visually communicating our ideas. We have an understanding of metaphorical thinking. This means that we can tell stories. So just a short metaphor from Shakespeare, Juliet is the sun. We're saying that a piece of music can stand for an emotion or tell a story, just like a painting can exhibit emotions, or that a movie can tell a bigger idea. That's pretty unique. We have this ability to use language to tell stories about ourselves. Animals can communicate with each other too, but don't have a writing system that we know of. Coco, the gorilla here again, knew many words and was able to communicate in complex ways. So she was a rare exception that we trained to do that. But we as humans are kind of hardwired for this spoken and written language. And this gets us to the brains, zombies, right? Brains. The human brain is really what makes us unique and are able to experience art and music. So humans have a capacity for learning and creating language that we use for communication. We also are very lucky in the fact that our brain size to body ratio is the largest compared to all other animals. That means that our brains essentially work faster and better than other animals do. You can see here in the brain, the cerebral cortex on the human is thicker. It has more insulation and more nerve fibers that allows it to do this quicker thinking. And again, this is how we process everything that we see, and music and language. More specifically, if you look here, we see that there are two main areas of the brain that connect language for us. One is called Broca's area, and the other is called Wernicke's. So right now we're really comparing how does the brain process language versus how it processes music. They have a lot in common, but there are some things that are unique to music as well. So Broca's area, again, near the front, mid-front of the brain. We really studied this under Paul Broca, who was a French neurologist, and he did investigations in the late 1800s into this part of the brain that controls speech. He did this by observing patients who had damage to that frontal lobe of their brains, and these patients could understand language but could only speak a few words. So again, they could understand, they could hear or process the information, but they could only speak in a limited amount. So this, for Broca, proves that this area represents the part of the brain where the neuronal representations that become physical motion of speaking. So imagine, how does an idea go from your brain to your mouth speaking that? They were missing that component in this study. The other area that we mentioned is Wernicke's area. So he worked kind of after Broca. He continued his work into the early 1900s. The patients that he used were a little bit different. They were unable to comprehend speech and could not construct meaningful sentences. However, they did struggle with word pronunciation. So again, this is the opposite of Broca's area. They were not able to comprehend. When they heard human speech, it didn't mean anything to their brain. They were not able to construct any meaning from what they heard. But they were able to construct sentences. They could convey ideas. So Wernicke's area is primarily responsible for the comprehension of language. Again, they had this area damaged, so they could not comprehend what they were hearing. I always like to think of these two areas as like the dynamic duo of the brain, because together they are really what allows us to understand language and also music. Without these areas functioning, you cannot process music in the same way. So the brain is unique. It is activated by many other areas, but again, Broca and Wernicke's handle these things: the input of sound to the brain, the conversion of sound to understanding, and control over the physical motion of spoken languages. These areas are unique to humans. Through new technology, functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, we're actually able to see how these areas are affected when we listen to music. You can see it lights up in these different ways that they're recording. This is always kind of fun I like to share. It's a video, or sorry, a photo of the human brain while listening to the song Gangnam Style. So you can see where it is lighting up in all these different areas. It goes beyond what we saw in Broca and um, Wernicke's area. So we've already established there is a connection between speech and music. So now that we know some of the differences, let's talk about what they have in common. Spoken language and music both utilize pitch. That means how low or high pitch frequency we're hearing in the human voice. It involves rhythm and timing, just like music. And it also involves syntax, the orderly arrangement of sounds in a system. This is like, having grammar or parts of speech. Just like that in music, we have ways of beginning and ending ideas. The human brain is uniquely constructed for successful intake, conversion, and execution of language and music. The brain is basically hardwired to listen to music and for speech. In general, the higher you go up on the brain, the more complex the action becomes. So let's start from the very front, the cerebrum, in the front right here. This controls the higher functions, such as sensory inputs, reasoning, emotions, memory, fine motor skills, and is possibly the most important for processing music, right here in the front. In the middle, the cerebellum, way down here. This controls muscle movement, processes the body's position in space, and balance. So you probably don't use this when you're listening to music, but if you are performing music, you're definitely using some muscle movement. And last is the brain stem, way down here. It's the smallest portion. This is the most evolutionary primal part of the brain, is also shared in primates, and it controls involuntary functions like breathing, your heart rate, body temperature, digestion, swallowing, coughing, vomiting, etc. And just a little bit more about the brain, just knowing that it is divided into a left and right hemisphere. Your brain actually crisscrosses these, and the left side controls the right side and vice versa. The left hemisphere is responsible for speech, comprehension, arithmetic, and writing, and the right hemisphere is responsible mostly for creativity, spatial ability, artistic, and musical skill. Each hemisphere is divided into 4 lobes or 4 sections, and the brain is very interconnected. None of the sections of the brain or the lobes work independently without being in touch with the other areas of the brain. There are 4 lobes of the brain: the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. And Broca and Wernicke's areas are actually smaller sections of these lobes. So just knowing that there are so many systems in place for the brain here. And they're all interconnected, especially for music. So we've talked about the brain. Now let's talk about how the sound comes to our brain in the first place. Again, back to the idea that sound is just wiggly air. Sound is just disturbance of particles in the air. So when you clap your hands or when you yell out, you're causing disturbances in the air column, and you're actually creating waves, sound waves. The sound waves travel to the ear, into the eardrum, and there are other hearing bones connected to you. You do have some little bones here in your ear, and these become electrical impulses sent through nerves to the temporal lobe. This creates an image of the sound in our mind. I always like to tell people too that the eardrum here really is like a drum. It's a stretched out piece of very, very thin skin, and when the air is disturbed, the sound wave comes in, it does cause it to vibrate, and thus what the signals we receive come from that vibration. I always like to include this too, this idea that hearing damage, this isn't in the textbook, but hearing damage is very important, and a lot of people don't think about it until it's too late. So it is important to remember that hearing damage is serious and also permanent. So I encourage you to be careful of electronic devices, like how loud you might put your earbuds or your headphones. Going to loud concerts or using power tools or even airplane travel is louder than you might think. So wearing a small set of earplugs or investing in some noise canceling headphones can be pretty helpful, but be careful about how loud you turn that volume. Wear earplugs when you know you will be in a loud place, or keep some with you in your car maybe. And tinnitus, which is a disease of ringing in the ears, and hear loss can come from exposure to loud sounds. There are some studies or some information here that 1.1 billion young people around the world are at risk of hearing loss due to unsafe listening practices. 49 million people aged 12 to 35 years live with disabled hearing loss. 1 in 2 young people listen to unsafe levels of sound through personal audio devices, and 40% of us are exposed to potentially damaging levels of sound in entertainment venues such as nightclubs, bars, sporting arenas, all these places. So be careful. A lot of people just aren't thinking about how loud things are, and then you discover that you have hearing loss 10 years later. So be careful. Be aware of it, like we learned from Paulina Olvera's deep listening. Just be aware of your listening surroundings, and if you can, lower the volume or wear some earplugs. Okay, so now getting a little bit further to language and how music affects the brain differently than language does. We see some similarities between language and music, but the brain processes it differently for a few reasons. For language, the processing is fairly isolated to only a few areas of the brain. Music, on the other hand, lights up your brain across various neural pathways. This is true whether you are listening, performing, or even thinking about music. Interestingly, areas of the brain that typically don't talk to each other or interact much communicate with each other while engaging with music. This is really interesting, I think. Some parts just start connecting in ways that normally doesn't happen. Music also affects our limbic system, which controls emotions and causes sympathetic emotional responses. This is also why music can be helpful in treating patients with Alzheimer's and helps us learn and remember things like the alphabet song, for example. How many of you learned that song learned the alphabet through a song, right? Now, this video right here, I'd encourage you to pause my own video and open this one up in the lecture slide. This is slide 31. Music has a really powerful connection to the brain, and it can unlock areas thought to be lost. So this is a video actually of some programs that have been done mostly to older individuals who have Alzheimer's to help them restore some memory or to improve their mental state using songs that they would recognize. So this is a program that has been developed, and this is just a very interesting look into the power of music and how it's used in a therapeutic role as well. Okay, so I hope you paused and watched that last video. We're going to continue here with part 3. This is music and human development, learning, and wellness. So a lot of people in this area, if you have ever played in a band, orchestra, or sang in a choir, or any other kind of ensemble of musicians, maybe as a rock band even, if you've done this for a while, you probably know and agree that being involved with music makes you feel good. You can see here an orchestra, the camaraderie that comes from playing with people. Sometimes people in an orchestra might play for 15 or 20 years together. That's a pretty deep relationship through music. You can also see here a drum circle. You can imagine playing guitar with your friends in the park or in your buddy's garage. You really have a way to connect. So this is the realm of music therapy. Music therapy is another way that we use music to connect human to human, and it can be used to great effect. Music therapy is a profession that has been established for over the past 60 years. It can help with things like rehabilitation, cerebral palsy, learning disorders, Parkinson's disease, and regaining motion or speech, or even mood disorders. Music therapy has proven to be very effective It is often considered to be the most powerful non-pharmacological tool to address health issues. This is because music triggers our brain as well as our motor cortex through our response to rhythm. So rhythm has this ability to kind of pull our brain out of maybe whatever we're feeling and to just experience the moment, to experience music. This is a great picture of a music therapist here with a guitar helping a soldier recover probably from PTSD. The American Music Therapy Association offers clinical internships. So this is something that you could actually study to become a musical therapist. To become a licensed music therapist, you must receive hours of training and experience. So, check out their website, American Music Therapy Association. You can do this in hospitals, nursing homes, with veterans, for example. There's lots of great uses of this programs. Okay, continuing with music therapy. Music is used as a stimulus when one encounters trauma, disease, or disorder and is the most powerful non-pharmacological tool we have. These again are two other excellent videos that talk about the power of music for therapy and for dealing with things like Alzheimer's disease. Continuing on here, the idea of music and mood. The power of music on our brains and our emotions is huge. Music has been proven to affect our mood and can reduce depression and anxiety, help with insomnia, and more. I used to listen to music falling asleep all the time. Engaging with liked music causes the release of serotonin and dopamine neurotransmitters in the brain, which leads to feelings of happiness and well-being. It also releases norepinephrine, which can result in a sense of alertness and euphoria. The act of singing, in particular, releases endorphins, the feel-good chemical in the brain. Remember, if you want, you can still join the CCC choir. We meet Mondays and Wednesdays, 2 to 3:50 p.m. Part 4. Why do and should humans make music? We've already covered what is music and how is music experienced. A lot of questions today. Now let's consider maybe the most important question. Why do we embrace music? Why is it worth appreciating? So music has been linked to new brain growth and an increase in processing efficiency. Students who start studying music have been proven to receive higher grades in their other subject areas. The Every Student Succeeds Act helped protect access to music as a core subject in public schools. So this shows how important it is that schools would value it in this way. We could also theorize that music could have helped early humans learn more effectively. If you see here, music has existed with humankind since prehistory. There are examples of music being enjoyed in ancient religious texts across cultures, and though because this music was not written down, we have lost it. Excuse me. So this is, a representation of a cave drawing. We can see here, again, a bone flute. These are some old string instruments, but you can imagine that this could have been made from things that people had thousands and thousands of years ago. Same thing with these drums. A clay pot with some animal skin stretched across the top, and then you have a drum. Humans have been musicking, or making music, since prehistoric times, as evidenced by ancient bone flutes. It is hypothesized that music may even predate human language. Um, Going to this idea of music in prehistory, music may have been our attempt to mimic nature and also has helped us tell stories. So again, we talked about maybe using music to call for birds for hunting. It can also we can use it to tell stories. Music, rhythm, and songs have historically been used to coordinate communal work and pass time while doing tasks. If you've ever done 1, 2, 3, pull or lift, that's a way of using rhythm to coordinate, for example. We can see that in a more advanced way through things like work songs, sewing songs, milling music, crushing grain to eat, sea shanties, those became popular a couple years ago, and for passing time and making work more tolerable. So music had a real function for us to help us do the things that humans do. Music's ability to interact with our sense and brain makes us feel good and helps us unlock our spiritual side. So this is a great video here of some Sufi folk music from Iran, where the dance and the music is really connected to deep spiritual and religious feelings. Again, you can pause this video and check this one out too. So, why do we make music? The answer really is that music is natural to human beings. Just like we have a real connection to language, we don't have to spend a whole lot of time to be musical. When you learned your first language, whatever it was, did your parents enroll you in lessons to learn that language? No. They just spoke around you and you naturally picked it up. Music is really the same way. Music is innately learned. We pick it up through life. We learn by listening to music, and this is true across many different cultures. By listening to music, you can kind of sing along to most songs. Our brains are hardwired for success in responding to and thinking about language and music. And even babies that have no experience with music or musical training have been studied that responding to the essential elements of music. And this kind of leads us to our last section, which is music and aptitude. To put it simply, aptitude is the ease and speed at which the brain processes certain information. Musical aptitude, or the ability to learn, is thought to form until age 8 or 9, alongside with language acquisition. This means that, your brain is kind of like a sponge when you're younger. It's easier to learn languages. It is also easier to learn an instrument at this age, or to learn how to sing, for example. So exposure for children to music at a young age is a very positive experience for them. While aptitude can make a difference, ultimately your achievement is the most important thing. If you can understand and listen to music, you can learn it yourself at any point in life. I always tell people it's never late to try to learn how to sing or to learn to play an instrument. Take some classes at CCC. Achievement is what you do with your aptitude. For example, while some children are born with a condition called perfect pitch, they can lose this ability if it is not fostered during their formative years. So perfect pitch is where you can hear a note on the piano or being sung, and you can tell, oh, that note's an E, that note's a B flat. They have this perfect pitch ability. Not everyone is born with it. We all have the capacity to sing, however, play a drum, or learn an instrument. However, a small portion of the population, very small, can experience a condition known as amusia, where music cannot be distinguished from noise to these situations. So this is really a strange condition where people hear music and it does not sound pleasant or really like anything to them. They cannot process it. Personally, I believe that active involvement in music should be experienced by everyone in some way. Being connected to music makes your life better. Okay, and that's the end of the lecture. So these are your 5 homework questions. You can find them in the submission in the week 1 module. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. And like I said, I'd encourage you to open the lecture slides and to watch the YouTube videos and really to listen deeply, like Pauline Oliveros told us. Okay, thanks for a great week, and hope you guys have fun on the assignment. Email me if you have any questions.